Commander Rebecca Sterling stood in her modest quarters aboard the orbital defense station, watching her daughter's face on the holographic display. Emma had just turned 12, and the party back on Earth was in full swing. Children laughing, colorful decorations, a cake shaped like a spaceship. Rebecca's heart ached with the familiar pain of distance. "Mom, when are you coming home?" Emma asked, her voice carrying that particular blend of hope and resignation that military children learn too early. "6 months, sweetheart. My rotation ends in 6 months, and then I'll have a full year planetside. We'll make up for lost time, I promise." Emma smiled, but Rebecca could see the doubt in her eyes. Promises were easy to make across the vast emptiness of space. Keeping them was harder. "I love you, Mom. Stay safe." "I love you too, Emma. Happy birthday." The connection ended, and Rebecca allowed herself one moment of weakness, a single tear that she quickly wiped away. She'd volunteered for New Terrain's Defense Force 3 years ago, believing in humanity's dream of expansion among the stars. The colony world below was home to 2.1 million souls, families building lives under alien suns, children like Emma growing up with mud on their shoes and stars in their eyes. Rebecca had no way of knowing that she would never keep her promise, that in 30 hours she would be dead, that her daughter would visit her name carved in stone rather than embrace her in person. But the universe has a way of hiding its cruelties until the moment they strike. The Zethian diplomatic vessel emerged from faster-than-light transit with characteristic precision. It was a beautiful ship, all flowing curves and bioluminescent panels that pulsed with soft blue light. The Zethian collective had been traveling the stars for 12,000 years, and their technology showed that age with elegant refinement. Ambassador Zethian stood in the vessel's command center, his elongated form swaying slightly as he reviewed the diplomatic package one final time. The Zethians were not cruel by nature, at least, they didn't consider themselves cruel. They were practical, logical. They had maintained an empire of over 200 systems through careful resource management and pragmatic decision-making. And right now, the collective was facing an energy crisis that threatened everything they'd built. "Transmit the proposal to both the colony and Earth's diplomatic corps," Zethian ordered. His translator rendered his crystalline language into flat, emotionless English. The message was straightforward. The Zethian collective was claiming new terrain under the doctrine of superior need, a galactic precedent thousands of years old. When an advanced civilization required resources critical to survival, they could claim them from lesser species. It wasn't personal, it was mathematics. The humans would be compensated, of course. 3 alternative worlds, carefully selected for habitability. Financial remuneration that was, by Zethian standards, quite generous. Technology sharing agreements that would accelerate human development by decades. And 30 days to evacuate, plenty of time for an organized, peaceful transition. Zethian actually felt proud of the proposal's fairness. Some members of the High Council had suggested simply taking the world without notice. He'd argued for this more humanitarian approach, and he'd won. 30 days. The humans should be grateful. Ambassador Marcus Webb had served Earth's diplomatic corps for 32 years. He'd negotiated trade agreements with the insectoid Threx, mineral rights with the aquatic Delians, and border disputes with a dozen other species. He was known for his patience, his careful preparation, and his ability to find common ground even in the most contentious situations. But as he read the Zethian proposal for the 3rd time, his hands trembled. 30 days, he said aloud, though he was alone in his office on the diplomatic station. "They're giving us 30 days to evacuate 2.1 million people. It wasn't impossible, technically. If everything went perfectly, if they had enough ships, if the logistics were flawless, if the 3 alternative worlds were truly habitable, if nothing went wrong." But Marcus had been in this business long enough to know that nothing ever went perfectly. He opened a channel to Earth's colonial administration and began coordinating the response. Within hours, evacuation plans were being drawn up. Ship manifests were compiled. Emergency protocols activated. And Marcus began the delicate work of negotiation. His counteroffer was reasonable, he thought. Verification of the alternative worlds. Surely the Zethians would understand the need to confirm habitability before committing to evacuation. Transportation assistance. They didn't have enough ships to move that many people that quickly. An extension to 45 days, just 2 weeks more to ensure everyone's safety, and guarantees for property rights and cultural preservation. Marcus believed in the power of good faith negotiation. He believed that reasonable beings could reach reasonable compromises. He would learn too late that reason was a luxury the desperate could not afford. Council Prime Thera-Vin of the Zethian Collective was ancient even by her species' standards. She had served on the High Council for 300 years, guiding her civilization through challenges that would have destroyed lesser species. She had seen wars, plagues, economic collapses, and stellar disasters. She had always found solutions, but this energy crisis was different. Without exotic matter to power their faster-than-light drives, their entire civilization would collapse, billions would die, 12,000 years of culture and achievement would crumble, and now these humans were negotiating. "They want 45 days," she said, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones of frustration. "They want verification. They want assistance. They want. They are within their rights to request verification of the alternative worlds," one of the younger council members ventured. "It is standard protocol. We don't have time for standard protocol." Thera-Vin's bioluminescence flared red. "Every day we delay costs us resources we cannot spare. Our people are suffering now. Our ships are stranded. Our colonies are rationing power." Fleet Commander Zach Storin, a military officer who rarely spoke in council sessions, leaned forward. "Then perhaps we need to demonstrate our resolve. 30 days was already generous for such a young species. They should be grateful we're offering compensation at all." The debate raged for hours, but Thera-Vin had already made her decision. She had not maintained the collective stability for 3 centuries by being soft. Sometimes hard choices had to be made. The needs of the many outweighed the needs of the few. It was mathematics. Simple, cold mathematics. "Send the revised terms," she ordered. "They have 30 hours to begin evacuation. After that we begin clearing operations. Make it clear this is not negotiable." The council chamber fell silent. Even those who agreed with the decision felt a tremor of unease. 30 hours for 2.1 million people. "Some will die," one council member said quietly. "Some," Thera-Vin acknowledged. "But most will evacuate, and the collective billions of our people will survive. It is an acceptable trade." She truly believed that. In her 300 years of service, she had made many such calculations. This was simply another entry in a long ledger of necessary sacrifices. What she could not know, what her 12,000 years of civilization had not prepared her for, was that some species kept different ledgers, and humanity's accounting was about to come due. Rebecca Sterling received the revised ultimatum while conducting routine patrol around New Terrain's orbital space. 30 hours. The word seemed meaningless at first, like a transmission error. Then the full weight crashed down on her. She pulled up the evacuation models immediately. New Terrain had civilian transport capacity for approximately 50,000 people at any given time, even running continuously, shuttling people to the few dozen deep space vessels in orbit, evacuating to nearby colonies. The math was brutally simple. In 30 hours, they could save perhaps 200,000 people. Maybe 250,000 if they packed ships beyond safety limits, if nothing went wrong, if they had perfect coordination. That left 1.85 million to die. Rebecca's hands moved automatically, initiating emergency protocols, coordinating with ground-based evacuation centers, organizing her small defense fleet to provide escort for the fleeing transports. But part of her mind had gone cold and analytical, the way it always did in crisis situations. Children first. That was the obvious priority, families with young children. Then essential personnel, doctors, engineers, people who would be needed to help the refugees survive wherever they ended up. Then skilled workers, then the brutal triage that no one should ever have to make. Who lives, who dies, who decides? On Earth, Ambassador Marcus Webb was transmitting desperate pleas to every spacefaring species within range. Could anyone spare transport ships? Could anyone intervene diplomatically? Could anyone help? The responses came back quickly. Sympathy, yes. Thoughts and prayers and considerations, but no ships, no intervention. The doctrine of superior need was galactic law. The Zethians were acting within their rights. It was regrettable, certainly. Tragic even, but legal. Marcus worked for 27 of those 30 hours without sleep, trying to find some angle, some leverage, some way to save his people. He failed. Rebecca worked for all 30 hours without a moment's rest, coordinating the evacuation with grim efficiency. She succeeded at saving 230,000 people. Neither of them would ever forgive themselves for what they couldn't do. The evacuation of new terrain was a portrait of humanity at its best and worst. There was the mother who pushed her 2 children onto a transport, then stepped back to make room for other kids, knowing she just watched her last moment with them. There was the elderly doctor who gave his evacuation slot to a teenage girl, saying he'd lived enough life for any man. There were engineers who stayed at their posts keeping power running, knowing they'd die but determined to give others every possible second. There were also riots at the spaceports, fights over evacuation slots, people trying to bribe or force their way onto ships, security forces having to make impossible choices about who to protect and who to restrain. Emma Sterling watched it all on Earth's news feeds, searching desperately for her mother's face. She didn't understand the politics or the diplomacy. She only understood that people were dying on new terrain and her mother was there. In the final hours, Rebecca made her choice. Her defense fleet, 12 light cruisers designed for piracy defense, not military combat, could evacuate another 100 people if they abandoned their posts. Or they could stay and buy time. She polled her captains. Every single one volunteered to stay. "All right," Rebecca said, her voice steady despite the fear in her chest. "We're not going to change the outcome, but we can make sure those transports get away safely. We can make sure the Zethians pay something for this." At exactly 30 hours, the Zethian fleet began their bombardment. 45 capital ships, each one larger than Rebecca's entire defense force combined. They targeted population centers with precision, using kinetic weapons that struck like the wrath of gods. Rebecca led her 12 ships in a desperate attack. They knew the math, this was suicide, but math wasn't everything. Sometimes fury counted for something too. They used every trick in the book. Guerrilla maneuvers, feints and false retreats, targeting weak points in the Zethian formations. Rebecca's tactical brilliance and her captain's skill turned those 12 ships into a swarm of angry hornets, stinging at a giant that barely noticed them. They destroyed 2 Zethian capital ships, damaged 4 others. They bought 17 additional minutes before the last of them was blown apart. Rebecca's final transmission was to Earth, to be forwarded to her daughter. She recorded it in the 3 seconds before her ship's reactor went critical. "Emma, baby, I'm sorry I can't keep my promise. I'm sorry I won't be there. Be brave, be strong. Make them remember us. I love you so much." Then Commander Rebecca Sterling, age 37, joined 1.87 million other souls in the void. For 30 days, Earth was silent. Every human diplomatic station was evacuated. Every ambassador recalled. Every trade route closed. Every communication channel shut down. The entire human sphere of influence, 22 colony worlds plus Earth itself, home to 18 billion souls, went dark. No transmissions in. No transmissions out. Nothing. The Zethian collective took control of new terrain and began mining operations immediately. Council Prime Thera-Vin issued a public statement expressing regret at the unfortunate loss of life while emphasizing the necessity of their actions for the greater galactic good. The exotic matter deposits were everything they'd hoped for. The energy crisis would be averted. The collective was saved. "The humans will recover," Thera-Vin told her council. "Young species are resilient. In time they will understand we had no choice." But some members of the council felt less certain. The silence from Earth was unsettling. Not angry transmissions or diplomatic protests, those they could have handled. Just silence. Fleet Commander Zach Storin reviewed intelligence reports on human military capacity. 212 registered military vessels, mostly light cruisers and frigates. Respectable for such a young spacefaring civilization, but nothing that could threaten the collective's 3,000 ships of the line. Earth had extensive defense satellites around their homeworld and major colonies, but again, nothing that suggested military aggression. "They're mourning," he concluded. "Perhaps reorganizing. We should expect some kind of response, but nothing we cannot handle." Other species watched and speculated. The warlike Kryn Empire was particularly interested. They'd always suspected humans were hiding something, that stubborn resistance in negotiations, that refusal to be bullied despite appearing weak. But 30 days of silence was not the act of a species preparing for war. It was the act of a species accepting defeat. Or so they thought. On Earth, in a facility buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Fleet Admiral Jackson Cole was not mourning. He was working. He was 56 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too much of humanity's worst conflicts in space. He'd been arguing for 30 years that humanity needed a real military, not just a defensive force. He'd been overruled again and again by politicians who believed in diplomacy, in peaceful expansion, in building a reputation as traders and negotiators rather than warriors. New terrain had proved him right. And now, finally, the politicians were listening. 30 days, he said to his assembled staff. They gave us 30 hours, we're giving them 30 days. Then we show them what we've really been building. Because humanity had a secret. While they'd been playing the role of peaceful explorers and eager diplomats, while they'd been cultivating their reputation as a non-threatening species, a small group of military planners had been preparing for the worst. Phase space technology, Devastator-class siege platforms. Weapons that no one had seen because they'd been carefully hidden, tested in deep space far from prying eyes, developed in secret facilities like this one. They'd hoped never to use them. Diplomacy was always better than war. But they'd learned from Earth's bloody history. Peace was only an option when everyone at the table knew the cost of violence. The Zethians were about to learn that cost. Exactly 30 days after the bombardment of new terrain, every Zethian facility, ship, and station received the same transmission. It bypassed their security protocols, appeared on every screen, interrupted every channel. The face on the transmission was human, older, weathered, with eyes that held no mercy. To the Zethian collective, I am Fleet Admiral Jackson Cole of Earth's military command. You requested 30 days to evacuate new terrain. We gave you 30 days, the same amount we asked for. You chose to give us 30 hours instead. You set the timer. You established the standard. Therefore, the Zethian collective now has 30 hours to evacuate your homeworld and all primary colonies. We recommend you begin immediately. Unlike you, we will adhere precisely to the timeline. At 30 hours and 1 minute, we begin operations. This is your only warning. The transmission ended. In the Zethian High Council chamber, chaos erupted. "This is a bluff," one council member shouted. "They don't have the capacity. Begin defensive preparations immediately," Zaxtorin ordered, his bioluminescence flashing urgent red patterns. "Mobilize the home fleet. Activate all planetary defenses." "Should we begin evacuations?" a younger council member asked. Council Prime Thera-Vin's response was sharp. "And show weakness. Let them see we take their threats seriously. No, this is psychological warfare. Humans are known for their bluffing in negotiations. We will prepare our defenses, but we will not panic." Deep space sensors were activated across Zethian territory. Intelligence networks went into overdrive, scanning for any sign of human fleet movements. They found nothing. No mass mobilization. No ships approaching from human space. No detectable military buildup. Zaxtorin allowed himself a moment of relief. It was a bluff after all. Humans were emotional creatures. This was their grief talking. Empty threats meant to make themselves feel powerful in the face of their impotence. At 28 hours, some civilian Zethians on the homeworld began voluntary evacuations, causing minor panic. The government ordered them to stop. This was merely creating disorder for no reason. At 29 hours, outer colonies reported strange sensor anomalies. Defense systems flickering in and out, as if experiencing technical malfunctions. Engineers were dispatched to investigate. At 29 hours and 30 minutes, Thera-Vin stood in the council chamber, surrounded by her advisors, feeling vindicated. The humans had made their dramatic threat and nothing had come of it. Perhaps now they could resume normal relations, though on terms that clearly established the collective's superiority. "When this 30-hour deadline passes with no incident," she said, "we will offer the humans a token gesture of goodwill. Additional compensation, perhaps. We can be magnanimous in victory." At exactly 30 hours and 1 minute, the sky above the Zethian homeworld filled with human warships. They appeared instantaneously, not through normal faster-than-light transit, which left detectable ripples in space-time, not through jump gates or wormholes. They simply materialized as if they'd been there all along, invisible, because they had been. Phase space technology worked on a principle that humanity had discovered almost by accident during deep space exploration. By shifting a vessel's quantum signature slightly out of phase with normal space, it could exist in a parallel state, still occupying the same location, but undetectable to conventional sensors, still able to observe normal space, but invisible to it. The human fleet had been positioned around every Zethian primary world for the past 24 hours, waiting for the deadline to expire. Zach Storin watched from his flagship as the human vessels materialized. He'd expected light cruisers, perhaps some improvised weapons platforms. What he saw made his bioluminescence pulse with fear. The ships were massive, Devastator-class siege platforms, each one 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that looked like they could crack a planet's crust. They were accompanied by hundreds of smaller vessels, cruisers, destroyers, and frigates that incorporated the phase space technology. "How many?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. 60 capital ships, Admiral. 423 support vessels, and those are just the ones around our homeworld. Reports are coming in from all 12 primary colonies, human fleets appearing out of nowhere. Zach Storin felt his certainty crumble. This wasn't possible. Intelligence had confirmed that humans had only 200 military vessels. They'd been so careful, so thorough in their assessments, but apparently humanity had been more careful in their deceptions. "Open all channels," he ordered. "Offer negotiations, offer." The first human weapons fire cut him off. Humanity had learned much from the Zethians' assault on new terrain. They'd studied the bombardment patterns, the target selection, the cold efficiency of it all. Now they demonstrated how much more efficient they could be. The human fleet didn't target civilian population centers. They targeted military installations, government facilities, industrial complexes, and infrastructure. Precision strikes that crippled rather than annihilated, disabled rather than destroyed. But precision was relative when dealing with planetary bombardment. When you destroyed a power generation facility, the surrounding area lost electricity. When you eliminated a spaceport, debris rained down on nearby cities. When you collapsed government buildings, the administrative districts died. The strikes were surgical, yes, but surgery can still kill the patient. Within the first hour, the Zethian High Council building was reduced to rubble. Thera-Vin survived only because she'd been in a lower level, protected by emergency shielding. She emerged into chaos, fires burning across the capital city, screams echoing through the streets, the sky filled with human ships that drifted like patient executioners. All 47 military orbital stations were destroyed. The planetary shield generators were obliterated. Major spaceports and industrial zones were flattened. The Zethian defense fleet tried to respond, but the human phase space technology meant enemies appeared and disappeared at will. It wasn't a battle, it was an execution. Zach Storin watched his fleet disintegrate. Ships that had served the collective for centuries were cut apart by human weapons. Crews he'd trained personally were vaporized. Everything he'd believed about military superiority, about the collective's strength, was revealed as illusion. "How did we not know?" he kept asking. "How did we not see this?" The answer was simple. Humanity had hidden it. They'd played weak while building strength in secret. They'd cultivated a reputation as peaceful traders while constructing weapons of incredible power. They'd smiled and negotiated while preparing for the day someone pushed them too far. The Zethians had pushed, and now they were learning the price. After exactly 30 hours of bombardment, the human fleet stopped. The Zethian homeworld was in ruins. Not destroyed, humanity had been careful about that, but crippled. Billions were without power. Communications networks were down. Transportation infrastructure was shattered. The government was in collapse. The military was decimated. And then Admiral Cole's face appeared on every surviving screen across the galaxy. This is Fleet Admiral Jackson Cole of Earth's military command. The Zethian collective has been neutralized as a military power. We have destroyed their capacity to wage war. We have not deliberately targeted civilians, though many have died as collateral damage, just as our civilians died as acceptable losses to the Zethians. The Zethian collective asked what our standard was. We gave them 30 days. They gave us 30 hours. We have returned precisely what they gave us, 30 hours of devastation. His voice was calm, almost gentle. That made it more terrifying. Let this serve as notice to the galactic community. Humanity will tolerate no further massacres of our people. We asked for peace. We negotiated in good faith. We gave you 30 days. You chose war in 30 hours. This is what our 30 hours looks like. Choose wisely. The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, civilizations that had viewed humanity as harmless suddenly reassessed everything. The phase space technology alone changed the entire military paradigm. But it was the ruthless efficiency, the cold precision, the sheer devastating capability that humanity had hidden for so long that truly terrified them. The Kryn Empire, whose warriors had earned respect across 100 battlefields, transmitted a single message to Earth. We acknowledge your strength. The Threx hive mind, which communicated only in mathematical probability, updated humanity's threat assessment from 0.003 to 0.847 in their collective consciousness. The doctrine of superior need was quietly abandoned by the Galactic Council. No formal repeal. It simply stopped being invoked. No species wanted to risk discovering what else humanity might be hiding. Ambassador Marcus Webb returned to active duty, but now he negotiated from a very different position. What remained of the Zethian government gathered in a makeshift command center deep beneath their devastated capital. Thera-Vin was there, her bioluminescence dim with shock and exhaustion. Of the 43 council members, only 19 had survived. Marcus presented Earth's terms without preamble. The Zethian collective will immediately surrender all claims to new terrain. All mining operations will cease. All Zethian presence will be withdrawn within 60 days. The world will be returned to human administration as a memorial site. The Zethian collective will pay reparations to the families of the 1.87 million dead. The amount is non-negotiable. The payment schedule will account for your current economic situation, but it will be paid in full. The Zethian collective will issue a formal apology and acknowledgement of responsibility for what will be known as the New Terrain Atrocity. This will be broadcast across all galactic channels. The Zethian collective will dismantle 80% of its remaining military capacity. Earth will verify compliance through regular inspections. Earth will supervise Zethian reconstruction. We will provide humanitarian aid, medical supplies, food, temporary infrastructure, but human military forces will maintain a permanent presence in Zethian space to ensure compliance with these terms. Thera-Vin listened with the weight of 12,000 years of civilization crushing down on her. She'd made the calculation. She'd decided that 2 million human lives were an acceptable price for her people's survival. Now she understood that she'd calculated wrong. She'd forgotten to account for one variable, that some species, when pushed, push back with overwhelming force. We accept, she said quietly. There was no negotiation, no attempt to soften the terms. The Zethian collective had gambled and lost everything. Marcus felt no satisfaction in the moment. He'd wanted to save lives through diplomacy, and he'd failed. The human military had succeeded where his words had not. He would spend the rest of his life wondering if there was something more he could have said, some argument he could have made, some way to prevent all of this. But he would also remember the 1.87 million who died because someone decided their lives were acceptable losses. 6 months after the bombardment of new terrain, the memorial was complete. It covered 20 square kilometers of the colony's former capital city. A vast plaza of white stone, with 1.87 million names carved in alphabetical order. Each name was accompanied by a small holographic display that could show photos, videos, personal messages left by loved ones. Emma Sterling stood in front of her mother's name with Admiral Cole beside her. She was 13 now, but her eyes held a weight that childhood shouldn't know. "She bought 17 minutes," Cole said quietly. Defense Fleet's attack delayed the Zethians just long enough for 3 more transport ships to escape. 80,000 people owe their lives to those final minutes. Emma touched her mother's name, traced the letters with her finger. "She promised she'd come home." "She kept a different promise," Cole said. "She promised to protect people. She did that until her last breath." They stood in silence for a long moment, surrounded by the names of the dead. This was what happened when mathematics forgot humanity. When pragmatism ignored conscience. When the strong assumed the weak would accept their fate. "Admiral," Emma said finally, "what happens now? We defeated the Zethians. We showed everyone we're strong, but there are so many other species out there. How do we stop this from happening again?" Cole had been asking himself that question for 6 months. "We make sure everyone remembers new terrain. We make sure they understand that humanity is not prey. We're not weak. We don't want war, we prefer peace, diplomacy, cooperation. But if someone decides to massacre our people," he gestured at the vast memorial around them, "this is the cost. This is what their 30 hours of arrogance bought them. We gave them what they gave us, nothing more, nothing less." Emma looked up at him with those 2 old eyes. "My teacher said you're a war criminal, that what you did to the Zethians was as bad as what they did to us." "Your teacher might be right," Cole admitted. "I killed millions. I crippled an entire civilization. I did it with full knowledge of the consequences, but I also made sure that no species will look at humanity and think we're acceptable losses. I made sure your mother and everyone here didn't die for nothing." "Was it worth it?" Cole looked at the names stretching into the distance. "Ask me again in 100 years. Right now, I just know I'd make the same choice again." The galaxy adjusted to its new reality quickly. Civilizations were nothing if not adaptable. The Galactic Council formally invited Earth to take a permanent seat, an invitation that had been under consideration for decades but suddenly became urgent. Humanity accepted, but on their own terms. They would participate, but they would not be bound by doctrines they hadn't helped create. The Kryn Empire approached Earth with an offer of military alliance. Their ambassador was a scarred warrior named Krell who'd earned his reputation in a dozen conflicts. "We respect strength," Krell said to Admiral Cole during the formal meeting. "Your species has demonstrated it. Together we could ensure stability across entire sectors." Cole's response was polite but firm. "We're not conquerors, Commander Krell. We're not your mercenaries. We don't want to build an empire. But if anyone threatens our people, they'll learn what the Zethians learned. We don't want war, but we're very, very good at it." Krell's response was a deep, rumbling laugh. "I like you, human. Most species either crave war or fear it. You simply accept it as a tool. That is wisdom." Trade routes that had closed during humanity's 30 days of silence reopened with unprecedented favorable terms. Species that had ignored human requests for assistance during the new terrain crisis suddenly became eager to establish defense pacts. The Threks offered technological exchanges. The Delians proposed joint scientific ventures. Everyone wanted to be humanity's friend now that they'd seen the alternative. Some human politicians argued this was good, that the demonstration of force had earned them respect and opportunities they'd never had before. Others argued it was a moral catastrophe that would define humanity's reputation for generations. Admiral Cole listened to both sides and kept his own counsel. He returned to his small apartment on Earth when his duties allowed, to a space filled with family photos and memories of a simpler time. His aide, Commander Patricia Hernandez, found him there one evening staring at a holographic image of new terrain before the bombardment. Children playing, families gathering, life being lived. "Do you regret it, Admiral?" she asked. The severity of the response. Cole was quiet for a long moment. "I regret that we didn't make our capabilities clear from the beginning. I regret that the Zethians thought they could murder 2 million of our people without consequence. I regret that Commander Sterling and 1.87 million others are dead because we appeared weak." He turned to face her, But the response itself, no. We gave them exactly what they gave us, 30 hours. They set the standard. We simply met it. And if another species makes the same mistake, they won't, Cole said with certainty. That's the point. The Zethians paid the price so that no one else has to. We demonstrated once and for all that humanity is not to be trifled with. It was a terrible lesson to teach, but it was necessary. He turned back to the image of new terrain, watching the digital ghosts of dead children laugh and play. The galaxy asked what our standard was. We told them 30 days. That's how long you have to do the right thing to make the moral choice, to remember that mathematics should never forget humanity. But push us, force us, murder our people. His voice hardened. Then you get 30 hours instead. 30 hours of exactly what you gave us, returned with interest. Hernandez left him to his thoughts. Outside the window, Earth continued its eternal rotation, carrying 18 billion souls who slept a little easier now, knowing that their species would not be easy prey. That there was a price for spilling human blood. That Commander Rebecca Sterling and 1.87 million others had not died unavenged. 10 years later, at the Galactic Council's annual summit, a young diplomat named Emma Sterling presented her credentials as Earth's newest ambassador. She was 23, brilliant, and carried her mother's determination in every word and gesture. She'd studied xenopsychology, interspecies relations, and military history. She understood both the power of words and the weight of weapons held in reserve. The Zethian representative, a younger council member who'd been off-world during the devastation, approached her during the reception. "Ambassador Sterling," he said carefully, "I knew your mother's name from the memorial. I wanted to say, what my people did was unconscionable. We have spent these 10 years trying to atone, trying to rebuild not just our civilization but our moral foundation. We teach our children about new terrain now, about the cost of viewing other beings as mathematics rather than lives." Emma looked at him for a long moment, weighing her response. She could see the genuine remorse in his bioluminescence patterns. She could also see the fear, wondering if humanity still carried grudges, still planned further retribution. "What happened 10 years ago," she said finally, "was the result of failures on multiple sides. Your people failed to see us as deserving of respect. The Galactic Council failed to intervene, and my people failed to make clear from the beginning what the consequences would be for such actions." She extended her hand in the human gesture of peace. "We can't change the past. My mother and 1.87 million others are still dead. Your civilization paid a terrible price for your leaders' decisions, but we can choose what we build from here. Earth wants peace. We've always wanted peace. But it has to be a peace built on mutual respect, on the understanding that every life has value, not just the lives of ancient civilizations." The Zethian grasped her hand carefully, relief evident in his posture. "We understand that now. Some lessons are only learned in fire." After he left, Emma stood alone for a moment, looking out at the gathered representatives of 100 species. Some avoided her gaze, some nodded respectfully. All of them knew what had happened when humanity was pushed too far. Her mother had died buying 17 minutes. Admiral Cole had spent 30 hours teaching the galaxy a lesson. And now it was Emma's job to make sure the peace lasted, to ensure that the sacrifice and the devastation had meaning. She thought of the promise her mother had made, to come home in 6 months. Rebecca Sterling had never kept that promise, but she'd kept another one. She'd protected her people until her last breath. And in doing so, she'd helped forge a new reality where humanity would never again be seen as acceptable losses. Emma touched the small pendant around her neck, a piece of metal salvaged from her mother's destroyed ship, fashioned into a memorial. She wore it every day, a reminder of the cost of both weakness and strength. The galaxy had learned to whisper a new phrase when discussing humanity: give them 30 days. It meant different things to different species. To some, it was advice: negotiate fairly with humans, give them time, treat them with respect. To others, it was a warning: push them too far and you'll get 30 hours instead. Earth's unofficial motto had spread across the stars, carried by traders and diplomats, soldiers and scholars. It appeared in galactic political science texts as a case study in asymmetric deterrence. It was taught in military academies as an example of overwhelming response doctrine. It was debated in philosophy courses as a moral paradox. Had humanity become the very thing they'd punished? But for Emma, standing in that council chamber 10 years after her mother's death, it meant something simpler. Her people would never again be helpless. They would never again watch evacuation timers count down while the galaxy looked away. They would never again be forced to make impossible choices about who lived and who died. That night, Emma transmitted her first official report back to Earth. It was brief, professional, outlining the day's diplomatic activities, but she ended with a personal note sent on a private channel to Admiral Cole, who was now retired but still consulted on major policy decisions. Admiral, I met the Zethian representative today. He spoke of atonement and lessons learned. I think he meant it. I think they've truly changed. But I also saw the fear in his eyes when he looked at me. They're afraid of us now. The whole galaxy is. I'm not sure if that's what Mom would have wanted. Cole's response came an hour later. Ambassador Sterling, your mother wanted you safe. She wanted all of humanity safe. She wanted a galaxy where her daughter could grow up without fear of becoming an acceptable loss in someone else's calculations. Whether fear is the foundation we'd have chosen for that safety, probably not. But it's the foundation we have. Your job now is to build something better on top of it. Show them that humanity can be generous in victory, that we remember how to be diplomats and traders and bridge builders. But never let them forget that we also remember how to be warriors when necessary. That's the balance. That's the legacy. Emma read the message twice, then saved it in her personal archive. She would need to remember those words in the years ahead. 20 years after New Terrain, the galaxy had achieved a strange equilibrium. Humanity sat on the Galactic Council with full voting rights and significant influence. The phase space technology had been partially shared with allied species, enough to demonstrate good faith, but not enough to eliminate humanity's tactical advantage. Earth's merchant fleet was the largest in known space. Human art, music, and culture had spread across dozens of worlds, and human warships patrolled the borders of space, a quiet reminder of the 30 hours. Admiral Jackson Cole was 76 now, long retired from active service but still sharp. He spent his days writing memoirs that he would never publish, teaching occasional seminars at military academies and visiting the New Terrain Memorial once a year. On this visit, he found he wasn't alone. Council Prime Thera-Vin stood before the memorial wall, her bioluminescence dim with age. She was ancient now, even by Zethian standards, and her time was running out. She'd spent the last 2 decades of her life in quiet work, helping coordinate reconstruction, advocating for reconciliation, teaching the next generation of Zethians about the cost of arrogance. Admiral Cole, she said without turning, I knew you would come today. It's the anniversary. Every year, Cole confirmed, moving to stand beside her. It seems like the least I can do. They stood in silence for a long moment, two architects of catastrophe paying their respects to the dead. Do you know, Thera-Vin said finally, what haunts me most? Not the deaths of my own people, though they number in the millions. Not the destruction of our civilization, though we are still rebuilding. What haunts me is that I truly believed I was making the right choice. The needs of the many outweighing the needs of the few. Simple mathematics. Mathematics without humanity, Cole said quietly. I've spent 20 years trying to forgive you. Some days I manage it. Most days I don't. I don't ask for forgiveness. I no longer deserve it if I ever did. Thera-Vin's bioluminescence flickered with patterns that translated to deep sorrow. I came here to ask you a question, human to Zethian, before my time ends. Do you think what you did, the devastation, the millions of my people who died, was justice? Or was it revenge? Cole considered the question. It was one he'd asked himself 10,000 times in the dark hours of the night. I think, he said slowly, that it was both. And neither. It was a message written in fire and blood because apparently that was the only language the galaxy understood. You taught us that diplomacy without power is just begging, so we demonstrated our power in terms everyone could understand. By killing millions. By giving you exactly what you gave us. You set the exchange rate. 30 hours for 1.87 million human lives. We honored that rate precisely. 30 hours for equivalent devastation to your civilization. He turned to look at her directly. You wanted to know our standard, we showed you, and created a galaxy ruled by fear. Better than a galaxy where my people are acceptable losses. Cole's voice hardened. You asked me if it was justice or revenge. I'll tell you what it was a promise kept. Commander Sterling and every person whose name is carved on these walls died because you thought you could negotiate in bad faith. Because you thought we were weak. They died proving that there's a cost for that kind of arrogance. My job was to make sure their deaths changed the galaxy. Mission accomplished. Thera-Vin was quiet for a long moment. You succeeded. The galaxy has indeed changed. But I wonder, Admiral, at what cost to your own soul, to humanity's soul? That's a price we'll have to live with, Cole admitted. But at least we're alive to pay it. Can the 1.87 million carved on these walls say the same? There was no good answer to that. Both of them knew it. I am dying, Thera-Vin said finally. The physicians give me perhaps 6 months. I wanted to see this memorial one last time, to stand before the accounting of my failure, to tell you that some of us at least learned the lesson, that we teach our children differently now, that mathematics should never forget the beings behind the numbers. Small comfort to the dead, Cole said. Yes, Thera-Vin agreed, but perhaps some comfort to the living. To those who come after. Is that not worth something? Cole thought of Emma Sterling, now a respected ambassador, building bridges where he had burned them. Of the generation of humans growing up in a galaxy that treated them with respect rather than contempt. Of the species that thought twice before resorting to violence because they remembered the 30 hours. Maybe, he conceded, maybe it's worth something. Thera-Vin bowed her head in acknowledgement. Then perhaps we both succeeded, Admiral. You changed the galaxy with your weapons. I changed my people with my failure. Terrible prices both, but something has been purchased with all that blood. She turned to leave, moving slowly with the weight of age and regret. Council Prime, Cole called after her. She paused. I hope your last months are peaceful. Thank you, Admiral. I hope your remaining years are as well, though I suspect we are both too stained by what we've done to find true peace. Cole watched her go, then turned back to the memorial. He found Rebecca Sterling's name, traced it with his finger as he did every year. I kept the promise, he said softly. Your daughter is safe. Your people are safe. The galaxy knows the cost of spilling human blood. I don't know if you'd approve of the methods, but the mission is accomplished. The carved stone had no answer. The dead rarely did. 50 years after New Terrain, the galaxy had mostly forgotten the details. The younger generations knew the broad strokes. Humanity had been attacked. Humanity had retaliated overwhelmingly. The balance of power had shifted. But the names, the faces, the individual stories had faded into history, except on Earth and in Zethian space, where they taught it differently. In human schools, children learned about Commander Rebecca Sterling, who bought 17 minutes with her life. About the 1.87 million who died because one species decided another's lives were acceptable losses. About the choice humanity faced, accept their place as victims or demonstrate the cost of aggression. In Zethian educational centers, students studied the New Terrain atrocity as their civilization's greatest moral failure. They learned about Council Prime Thera-Vin's calculations that forgot to account for the value of individual lives. About the 30 hours that destroyed their empire and rebuilt it on a foundation of humility. The Galactic Council had long since established new protocols. Disputes were negotiated with much more care. The doctrine of superior need had been replaced with the doctrine of shared necessity, which required consensus and compensation before any forced relocations. Humanity's fingerprints were all over the new regulations. And in a small ceremony on New Terrain, now a memorial world where only caretakers lived, a very old woman stood before her mother's name. Emma Sterling was 73, her own diplomatic career long concluded. She'd helped negotiate the Theta Accords that established free trade between 7 species. She'd mediated the Kryn-Virin conflict that could have destabilized an entire sector. She'd spent 50 years proving that humanity could be more than warriors. But she'd never forgotten where that opportunity came from. Hey, Mom, she said quietly as she did every year. I'm retiring next month, finally, going to spend time with the grandkids. Michael's daughter just turned 12, same age I was when you died. She wants to join the Colonial Survey Service. I told her she should go for it. The galaxy's different now, safer, because of what you and Admiral Cole and everyone did." She touched the stone gently. "I spent my whole life trying to prove we could be something other than the species that destroyed the Zethians. I think I succeeded. We're traders and diplomats and bridge builders again. But we never forgot the lesson. Never forgot that sometimes the only way to ensure peace is to demonstrate the cost of war." A younger couple approached with a small child, come to see the name of a great-great-grandparent carved in the memorial. Emma nodded to them politely and stepped back, giving them space for their own moment of remembrance. The galaxy had moved on. New crises, new conflicts, new opportunities. Humanity was now one of the major powers with all the responsibilities and complications that entailed. The Zethian collective had rebuilt into a smaller but more thoughtful civilization. Other species had risen and fallen. The universe continued its eternal dance. But the phrase remained, "Give them 30 days." It had evolved beyond its origins. Now it meant giving people time to do the right thing, allowing space for negotiation, remembering that behind every statistic, every calculation, every strategic decision were individual lives that mattered. And if you didn't give them 30 days, if you thought you could take shortcuts, if you decided some lives were acceptable losses, well, then you'd get 30 hours instead. That was the standard. That was the legacy. Commander Rebecca Sterling had kept her promise after all, not the promise to come home to her daughter, but the deeper promise to protect her people, to ensure they'd never again be helpless victims, to buy with her life a future where Emma could grow old in a galaxy that respected humanity. The price had been terrible. The methods were still debated. The morality would forever be questioned. But the result was clear. Humanity had asked for 30 days, been given 30 hours, and taught the galaxy that some mistakes carried permanent consequences. And in doing so, they'd ensured that future generations would be given the time, the respect, and the consideration that Commander Sterling and 1.87 million others had been denied. That was the promise kept. That was the legacy honored. That was humanity's standard, written in stone and blood and the silence of the dead. A reminder to the living that some prices, once paid, change the galaxy forever.